In this video, I'm going to have a look at installing a Windows 95 guest virtual machine on a Windows 1125H2 host PC. Now obviously the host PC is going to need to satisfy Windows 11 system requirements and generally satisfy them quite well in order to run a virtual machine on top of Windows 11, although Windows 95 in this case doesn't have very high system requirements. So before we install VMware Workstation Player, we're going to want to enable some Windows components. Now I'm just having a look in system to see if there's a way of adding these. Seems this still needs to be done using the legacy control panel. So I'm going to open up atwiz.cpl and then I'm going to turn Windows features on or off and enable virtual machine platform and Windows Hypervisor platform. Now I'm going to download and install VMware Workstation Player version 17.6.4. Now unfortunately, in order to download this, you need to sign up for a Broadcom account. And once you log in to the Broadcom website, it may take you somewhere else. So you need to go back to the VMware link once you're logged in, and then you need to select the free downloads. And then you can download VMware Workstation Professional. Now Broadcom should just make the free downloads available to download without having to go through this process of signing in for an account like the VMware used to do. So this is a bit convoluted. However, VMware Workstation Professional is free for personal, non-commercial use. So we're going to go ahead and install it. And it's going to ask to restart the computer. So I'll restart the computer and then I'll relaunch the setup once the computer is restarted. So you can optionally check for product updates and startup, and optionally leave feedback to Broadcom in order to improve VMware Workstation Professional. Okay, so now it's installed, select finish. Okay, so in this video I'm going to have a look at setting up a Windows 95 guest. So the first thing we're going to need to do is download a lot of different items, including Windows 95 installation disks. So you need a non-bootable CD and you need a bootable floppy image. We're also going to need to use some utilities in order to patch the Windows 95 installation media. So one of the patches required even to run this in a virtual machine using a modern processor is the Patcher 9X. So essentially the processor is a lot faster than Windows 95 expects. So it rounds the time it takes for a lot of operations down to 0. And then you've essentially got a 0 division error. And this is what the Patcher 9X addresses. So we also need the chipset driver and the audio driver. We're also going to need to use 7-zip to extract the installation ISO and image burn in order to reconstruct the installation ISO. Okay, so the Windows 95 installation ISO is in a zip file, so this needs to be extracted. This can be done with Windows Explorer. After this, we're going to need to install 7-zip to extract the installation ISO into a folder. And then we're going to need image burn in order to reconstruct the ISO from the updated folder. Okay, so let's extract this installation ISO from the zip file. And here is the installation ISO called disk01. We can delete the old folders. Now we need to select show more options, 7-zip, and we want to extract here. So now what we want to do is essentially patch the Windows 95 installation files. And to do this, we need to copy the address. And then we need to extract the Patcher 9X and go ahead and run this command line utility. So if we right click this Win95 folder and paste here, notice that we pasted quotations, so this utility won't work if the quotations are here. So if we get rid of the quotations, it finds the Windows 95 cabinet files, and we want to select option 4 to extract the files and patch them, and then we want to select Y to proceed with the patch and then press enter to exit. Okay, so now we don't need the Patcher 9X folder. So now we can go ahead and launch Image Burn. And we can select create image file from file/folders. And what we want to do is select this disk 01. And then we want to go to downloads. And we can just call this Windows 95.iso. And then we can just build this image, select yes at the prompt. And let's just relabel it Win95. And then select OK. And now we have the updated Windows 95 installation ISO. So we can delete this old folder. We can delete this information file. And we can delete the Patcher 9X. Okay, so now we've got a collection of updates, and some of them are in the format that Windows 95 expects. Others are in zip files, so we can just go ahead and extract them. So we can delete the old zip file and the extracted folder. We only want the Windows 95 application. Okay, so we have everything we need in this updates folder. And what I'm going to do now is launch Image Burn. And then just select this updates folder. And then I'm going to save this as an updates.iso. And then select yes, and then OK. So now I can delete this updates folder and this information file. So we've got everything we need to set up the virtual machine now. So let's open up VMware Workstation Player. And then select Player, File, New Virtual Machine. And then select Browse and select this Windows 95 ISO. So Windows 95 is detected, we can use the default location. I recommend updating the maximum disk size to 32 gigabytes. And then you want to select Customize Hardware. And you want to increase the memory to 256 megabytes. Now you can increase this further to 512, but according to reports, it's a bit more unstable at this setting. So under Network Adapter, you want to make sure it's not checked, as it's unsafe to connect Windows 95 to the internet. And we also need to add a floppy disk, because the Windows 95 installation CD is not bootable. So we don't want to launch the virtual machine right now because we need to make some changes to the virtual machine's configuration file. So what we want to do is edit this in Notepad, and we want to add a number of lines to this virtual machine configuration file, which disable some newer processor technologies and newer graphics, which cause issues on a Windows 95 virtual machine. So essentially different technologies that Windows 95 doesn't understand, which causes issues. So we can select don't show this security warning again. And now we boot from the floppy disk and we can select option 1. So what we need to do is type in fdisk. And this is a DOS command to create partitions on the disk. So we can select option 1, and then when prompted, press Y in order to proceed. It's going to tell us we need to restart now. So press escape and then select player and then send Control Alt and delete. Once again, select option 1. And now we want to type in the command format, and we want to format the C drive, and we want to use the option /S, which will add entries onto the partition being created, making it bootable. Okay, so now press enter, and it will use the volume serial number. Okay, so I'm going to change to the C drive, and I'm going to make a directory called Win95, and then I'm going to copy all the files from D Win95 to C Win95. So there are some issues running the setup from CD, so once it reboots, you don't get the driver for the CD, and Windows 95 can't find its setup files. Okay, so what we want to now type in is C Win95 and then setup, and then we want to use the flag IS to install. So this will start the Windows 95 setup using the graphical user interface. And we want to make sure we're running this from C and not D, because we'll lose the setup files when the computer reboots. So select continue, accept the license agreement, select next, use the default directory, C Windows, select next. Here what we want to do is select custom, and then select next. Next you're going to be prompted for the OEM product key, so we can get this from WinWorld, and if we just type in this OEM product key, we can select next. Next, type in your name, then select yes recommended, and then select next. Here don't check anything and just select next. So the Windows 95 setup is going to analyze the virtual machine's hardware, and here we can just select next. Here we need to select add, and we need to select adapter, and then to the left we want to select AMD, and to the right we want to select PCNet family adapter, PCI and ISA. Next we want to select add protocol, and then Microsoft, and then TCP/IP. Then we can select next, and we can just give this a computer name, so I'm just going to call it VM. And then select next and just review some of the settings. So here I'm going to want to change some of the settings from American English to British English. Okay, so under keyboard it's asking to select a device. I'm just going to leave this at the default. Under regional settings, I'm going to change this to British. And then I'm going to select I do not want to create a startup disk, and then select next. So Windows 95 will install and then prompt for a restart. So here it's going to instruct us to remove the floppy disk. So we need to do this in the virtual machine settings and uncheck connected and connected at startup. So now it's going to boot from the C drive, the Windows 95 install on the C drive. So input your username and password. In this case, I'm just going to leave a blank password. Here I'm going to select no. This error message displays because I'm not connected to the internet. So next I need to select the time zone and then select apply and then OK. I'm going to be asked whether I want to set up a printer. I'm going to select cancel and then I'm going to select OK. So now the Windows 95 guest VM will reboot and we're going to be taken into the Windows 95 setup for Internet Explorer 4. So this setup hangs when it gets to this multimedia components at 76%. So what we need to do is send Control Alt and Delete, and we need to end this process that's hanging, and then it goes ahead and finishes the setup of Internet Explorer 4. So then it brings us to this active desktop, which we can get rid of by closing the toolbar to the right and right clicking the desktop and going to properties and then selecting web and then unchecking. So we're now on the Windows 95 desktop. We can now shut down the Windows 95 virtual machine. And what I would recommend doing is going to your virtual machines folder and just copying this. Windows 95 is really unstable, so you're going to want to essentially copy the folder of a working configuration, and if you run into problems then you can delete the modified folder and then rename the copy and then relaunch this. Okay, so if we right click my computer and select properties, we'll see that there are a number of unknown devices. So we're going to need to install system drivers and some other Windows 95 updates. Okay, so this command line utility to get more details about hardware IDs doesn't work at the moment until the updates are installed. So what we want to do is change the CD to the updates CD. And then in the update CD, the first thing we want to install is the chipset drivers. So select OK and then unzip and then OK. So the setup loads information in Internet Explorer and you need to select install now and then select run this program. And then you can go ahead and proceed with the setup. And then restart when prompted. And then log in. So then it's going to go ahead and install the drivers for a number of the virtual machines devices. So it will require a restart. And then select OK. And now the chipset driver is installed. So what we can do is right click my computer and go to properties, and then under device manager we can see one of these other devices is now removed. Okay, so now we've installed the chipset drivers. There are a number of additional drivers to install for USB functionality. Now USB functionality doesn't really work in Windows 95 because only early USB 1.0, 1.1 devices were supported. So it's essentially a limited number of keyboards and USB, low capacity USB flash drives. So after we've installed these two, what we want to do is install the unofficial Windows 95 service pack. So the first thing we want to select is the main system updates, and then we want to reboot. And then essentially what we want to do is run this again. So you can run this and install a single component at a time. In this case, I'm going to install 4 components at once. So this is going to be the Adaptor ASPI drivers, the Uni modem drivers, the Windows management instrumentation, and the MS system information and system tools. So install these and reboot when prompted. So after it reboots, you're going to want to launch it again and install WinSock 2.2. And then once again reboot. So now that this is installed, we can go ahead and install Internet Explorer 5.5. So this IE setup, it extracts files in the current location. Now if the current location is read-only, such as the CD, the installation is going to fail because it can't extract the files. So we want to copy this to the desktop, and here you can see it's extracting all the files to this folder. And then in this folder, what we're going to want to do is run the setup. So this is the IE5 setup. We accept the license agreement and select install now. And it's going to go ahead and install, and then we can select finish. Okay, so now what we want to do is install VMware tools. So we select player, manage, install VMware tools, and it instructs us to download the pre-2K ISO. So then we can load this in the virtual machine CD drive, and we can go ahead and begin to install. So select next and then complete, and then next and then install. And then this error message displays telling us we need to install the video driver manually. So select finish, and then this installation instruction displays. So I'm just going to hide this just now. And then I'm going to select advanced properties and then change. And then I'm going to select standard display types and then standard PCI graphics adapter and then have disk and then browse. So here we want to select C program files, VMware, and then we need the VMware subfolder, and then we want drivers and then video, and then we want to select this file, and then we can select OK and then OK. Select VMware SVGA 2 and then select apply and then OK. And then when you select close, you're going to be prompted to restart the Windows 95 guest. So log in, and then now if I right click my computer and then select properties, I'll see that the display adapter is now installed. If I right click desktop and select properties, I can now see that the color profile is 32-bit, and I can change the display resolution. So before it lets me do this, it's going to ask me to specify a monitor, and so I'm going to select standard monitor type and then plug and play monitor. So now that this is configured, notice that when I resize this window in the Windows 11 host, then the guest display automatically updates to match the size of the window. So VMware Tools is now installed. However, some system drivers are still missing, such as the audio driver. So I'm going to go ahead and install this now. So launch the Windows setup, select unzip, and then in Internet Explorer, select install now, and then run this program from its current location, and then just use the default options to go ahead and install this driver. Okay, so restart the computer now. And it's going to finish setting up the driver and prompt for another restart. And then it's going to prompt for another restart. So now you should hear some audio when you log in. So now that we've got the video driver installed, we can go ahead and install DirectX 8, or some people prefer installing DirectX 7. So you would need to download this separately and install this if you wanted to use 7 opposed to 8. So we can launch the Unofficial service pack and go ahead and install Windows Media Player as well. So once again, it's going to prompt for a restart. Okay, so that's everything installed. So if we right click computer and select properties and go to device manager, we can still see that there's 2 unknown devices. So we can get more details about these using hardware info and running the UI version of it. So we've got this PCI system peripheral, and from here we can get the hardware IDs. So if I go ahead and look these up, there's this old Broadcom article, and it's since been removed, but it essentially tells you that this device doesn't have a driver on Windows 98 and 98 2nd edition, which means it also won't have it for Windows 95. So I think this is for the shared folders, which don't work in these old operating systems. There's also this unknown device, which seems to be some sort of network device, and I couldn't get any details on this driver. However, the Windows 95 setup seems to be functional. So now we've got the updates and drivers installed, I recommend creating another backup of the Windows 95 folder. So we can go to Edit Virtual Machine Settings and select Shared Folders. Now the menu isn't grayed out, but this option, in order to map as a network drive in the guest operating system, does not work. So here you can see when I enable this share, essentially when I log into the Windows 95 virtual machine, when I go to my computer, I should be able to see this network drive, and I don't. So bidirectional drag and drop seems to work between a Windows 11 host and a Windows 95 guest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Python as an example of installing a legacy program. So the last version of Python to work is version 2.5.4. And I'm also going to try and install some Python packages. So this is before the Python package manager, pip. So the packages were typically installed using their separate exe installer. So let's go ahead and install Python 2.54. And we'll go ahead and install it in the default location. Okay, so if we go to my computer and then C, we now see we've got this Python 2.5 folder, which has the Python exe. And if we go to MS-DOS, what we can do is launch this Python exe. And this displays the Python prompt. And we can type in some Python code. Bear in mind that this is Python 2 and not Python 3. And we get this hello world. And then we can exit the Python program, returning back to the DOS prompt. So the lib folder contains the Python libraries, the Python standard libraries. And third-party packages are supposed to be installed in the site packages folder, which is empty by default. So we can try install this pywin32, and notice that it finds the Python installation in the site packages folder. However, it fails to install some of the DLLs. So you can see changes have been made to site packages, although this library is likely not going to work properly. Next, we can do the same with PySerial. Once again, it finds the Python directory and the site packages folder, and it installs correctly. So we can try and see if this works. So once again, we can launch Python. And we can try to import Serial. And we get this error message because Serial is reliant on the other packages, and these did not install properly. So this setup worked on Windows 98 2nd edition, but it didn't work on Windows 95. So now let's actually have a look at adding a serial port to the virtual machine. So I've got this USB to serial port adapter, and I've got the VM closed down. So what I can do is right click the start button and go to device manager, and here is the USB to serial port. So if I go to advanced, I can see that this is COM free. So I can edit the virtual machine settings. I'm going to need to make sure that I've got the Windows 95 ISO here, because it will use it to install a driver. And then I'm going to select add and then serial port. Now you can auto detect it, but sometimes it's more reliable just to say what physical serial port you're using. So in this case, COM3. So when the VM's launched, after you log in, it's going to install new hardware. And if we right click computer and select properties and go to device manager, we can see that this has been loaded in as COM port 1. So the device manager doesn't give any options to change the port number. Also, a lot of legacy programs for Windows 95 will expect COM port 1 automatically. So I'm just going to leave this as it is. And I'm going to install Teraterm. So once again, I need to download the old version of Teraterm and go ahead and launch the setup. So I'll select English and then continue, continue. And here I can select OK. And now I can go ahead and launch Teraterm. So it's in C, Program Files. And then there's this Teraterm Pro folder, and I can go ahead and launch Teraterm Pro. So I'm going to connect to port number 1, and then I'm just going to use the default serial port settings, and I can change some of the terminal settings. So I just want to change the new line behavior for receive and transmit, and also to have the local echo setting. Okay, so I've typed in A, and this is only being transmitted, it's not being received. If I connect pin 3, which transmits, to pin 2, which receives, notice that every single character I type in is now doubled, and this is because it's sent out down pin 3 and received from pin 2. So we know the serial port is working. So now I'm just going to select File and disconnect to free the serial port. If you don't do this and you attempt to shut down, then what happens is the virtual machine freezes while trying to shut down. So we want to avoid this by disconnecting the serial port before shutting down. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial video. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe, letting us know what you're running in your Windows 95 virtual machine.